Welcome to our second lesson on functions. Today we're going to be looking at domain and range in functions. The first lesson we looked at what functions were, and we basically looked at the basic substitution that you could do when you're trying to find the output. Now, before we do, we look at domain and range. I would like us to really very quickly just recap on what we did last time in the first video. So in here, I've got my function f of x equals to 30 minus 2x squared. Now we agreed that whatever is in bracket here is what becomes your input, and input is always the value of x. So I'm going to be doing where x is, I'm going to be putting 2t because that's my input, and that's going to be equals to 30 minus 2 times by 2t close bracket square, because x is basically 2t. Simplify my working out, I've got 30 minus 2. We do the indices first, so the powers, I need to do 2 squared, which is 2 times 2. And 2 times 2 is basically 4t squared. Okay, so 2t squared is basically 2t times 2t, and 2t times 2t is basically 4t squared. Okay, so if you're struggling with that, let's just box that. Right, so here we are now. Should I put 2 there? That's going to be 4t squared, and then a close bracket. Okay, carrying on, I've got the 30. Then now I can open this bracket. This is 2 times 4t squared, which is going to be 8t squared. But then there's minus there, which I keep. Yeah. Now, so my final answer becomes 30. Take away 8t squared because there's nothing that I can do to simplify that. Okay. So when your input is 2t and your function is 30, take away 2x squared, the 2t becomes your x value, and all you need to do is to simplify that. So this is basically the answer to that. I would like you to pause this video, and I would like you to have a go at question A all the way to E. Do make sure that you do question D and E, because very likely I'm going to go over the last two questions. Pause the video and try this. Okay, well done. For having a go at them. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to do very quickly, I'm going to try and do question D, which is f of x equals to the square root of 5x minus 1. And I want to pick my input to be 1 minus 2x. Okay, so I'm going to choose to do that. It looks a bit hard, so I'm going to do that. So you now say that f of x equals to the square root of 5x minus 1. Okay, and again the square root over there. I've got 5 times by x. Remember, x is the input, and our input is 1 minus 2x. Okay, so that's going to be 1 minus 2x. Close the bracket, and then minus 1 outside. That minus 1 becomes there. Okay. Now carrying on from there, all I need to do is to open the brackets. So I'm going to do 5 times 1 and 5 times 2x. And that's going to be square root side. 5 times 1 is 5. And then 5 times 2x is basically 10x. And then I've got minus 1 up there. Simplifying that, like terms, so 5 and minus 1. That's not 1, that's minus 1, which is going to be 4. And then I've got minus 10x there. Just copy it at the back as minus 10x. And then I put the square root side. Okay. There's nothing I can do to simplify this, so that's just the end of that. Okay, I'm gonna try do E again, question E, and I'm gonna get my input. Let my input be 1 over x. I'm gonna try this one very quickly. Okay. Right, so let's have a look at this quickly. So I've got 4x. F of x is 4x squared minus 5x plus 1. So let's have a go. Right, so f of x. Now my x now become 1 over x equals to 4 bracket 1 over x. We're squaring because it says square there, so we're squaring our input. take away 5 times our input. I prefer putting brackets, add 1. Okay, simplify that. You do the indices first. So got 1 over x times by 1 over x, which basically becomes 1 over x squared. Close bracket, I've got 5 times 1 over x, so you do 5 times 1 at the top, which becomes 5, and then x stays at the bottom. And then that becomes plus 1. Right, let me just take it back to that, how I did that. I've got 1 over x being squared, and that basically means 1 over x times by 1 over x. When I times in fractions, you times the top numbers, which is going to be 1, times the bottom numbers, which is going to be x squared. Okay, so that's how I got this one here. Now, what about that one? That becomes 5. You're timesing it by 1 over x. When you times in fractions, you can always put 1 over the whole number, so then it looks like a fraction. Then you can then times the numerators, which is 5, and then you can times the denominators here, which becomes 1 times x is basically x. And that's how I got this one. Okay. Now simplifying, you can open this bracket here, you do 4 times 1, which is 4 all over x squared, minus 5 over x plus 1. Okay, that's the end of that. So when your input is 1 over x, f of x becomes this one here. Okay. Very quickly, I'm going to just put the answers down for you, so then you can mark your work. There you are. So if you just quickly mark your work. Okay, so we're going to move on then. Right, so today we're going to be looking at domain and range. We've been talking about input, we've been talking about output. Technically, the word domain is used instead of the word input a lot. And the word range is used more than the word output when it comes to functions. So input are the values you begin with, the x values, and the output are the y values that you end up with. Now we call them the domain. The range of x values that you begin with, we call them the domain. And the range basically are the values that you end up with. Okay. Okay. So we say that the domain of a function is a set of all the values that can be put into it. And the range of a function is the collection of values that come out of the function. Each value in the domain maps onto a value in the range. For example, I've got a mapping diagram here, which is basically f of x equals 2x. So all I'm doing basically is to double these numbers to get them. Now, the numbers that I start with are called domain. The ones that I end up with, we call them range. Okay. Notice that each value on the domain is mapped onto a value on the range there. So each value is mapped to a value on the range. Each value of the domain mapped to a value on the range there. Okay. So map diagrams show how values in the range correspond to values in the domain. Here, the domain of the function f of x equals 2x is 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4 are the starting values, and the range is 2, 4, 6, 8, which are the values that we end up with. Okay. Now, what kind of questions will you expect in exam? In your GCSE or IGCSE, you can find a question like this, which says the domain of the function f of x equals to x squared plus 1 is negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. Use these values to find the range of f of x. Pretty easy. All you need to do is to sub in as you've been subbing in so far. So I want to find the value of range that will correspond with this domain here of negative 1. All I do is to sub in negative 1 there. So I'm going to say, let my input be negative 1. And if my input is negative 1, then I'm going to have x squared, right? X squared, which is that. Now x squared, which is basically going to be negative 1 square. So we've got negative 1 square plus 1. Now negative 1 square becomes 1, and 1 plus 1 basically becomes 2. So when x is negative 1, y is 2. When my domain is negative 1, my range becomes 2 there. So you do the very, very same thing with all these other values, and then you come up with a set of range. Okay. So you can see what my ranges are. This one's here. Okay. All right. So pause the video again and try question 1A all the way to J. And then once you're done, then play the video so then I can go over 2 questions. So pause and have a go there. Okay, well done. Now I'm going to go over question J. F of x equals 30 over x plus 1. I've been given here the domain and I've been asked to find the range. Very simple again. All I need to do is to take these values there and just be subbing them here as I get corresponding range values. So the first one, I'm going to do f of 0. Okay, so if the input is 0 or the domain is 0, what is going to be my range? So I've got 30 there divided by x. X is 0, so it's going to be 0 plus 1. And that's going to be 30 divided by 1, which is basically going to be 30. Okay, so when my input is 0, the output is basically 30. That's what I say. Do the same with 2, do the same with 4. It's all just substituting in. Okay, now I'm going to have a go at question I. I'm going to do I, and I'm going to pick a -1. So for I, g of x, it's a different function. I said different letters just means that they're different functions. So g of x is equals to 2 times pi. What x is? X is -1, so it's -1 there. Then we add 1, and then we close bracket, which is going to be 2. All right, so carrying on from that, -1 times 2 is basically -2, and then I've got plus 1 there, and then I'm squaring my answer. Simplifying the bracket first, I've got -1, 2 plus 1, which is -1. Squaring that, I'm going to have -1 squared, which is basically going to be 1. Okay, so when the input is -1, the output is going to be 1. So you do the very same thing. All you need to do, where x is, you put the 0, you put the 1, and you put 2, and you find your corresponding answers. Okay. Now I'm just going to put the answers down for you now to mark your work and see it. You should notice that the numbers have been put in order. There's nothing wrong with that. Once you found your numbers for the range, you can always put them in order from smallest to biggest. If you don't, it doesn't really matter. So pause the video and just take time and mark your work. Okay, that's well done. Hope you did well on that. So that's going to mark the end of our second lesson on functions. We did an introduction to functions in the first lesson, and we've also now done what domain is and what range is. So this is going to be the end of our second session on GCSE and IGCSE videos. Thank you so much.